Did you know Maine has more coastline than California, even though California looks about 10 times bigger on a map? Or that there's a genuine desert sitting in the middle of the most forested state in America? How about the fact that more than half of Maine has no towns at all? No local government, no mayors. Just numbered grids on a map where almost nobody lives. Well, there's a lot more to Maine than lobster rolls and lighthouses. Look a little closer, and you'll find the strangest, emptiest, most extreme corner of the entire East Coast. A place with the biggest whirlpool in the hemisphere and tides that move more water than every river on Earth. Today, we're breaking down 50 insane geography facts about the Pine Tree State. Let's get into it. Subscribe to this channel if you love the USA, because every week we dig into the hidden geography of another American state, and there's a whole lot more of this country hiding in plain sight. Fact 50. It's the most forested state in America. Roughly 89% of Maine is covered in trees, which is the highest percentage of any state in the country. That works out to just under 17.7 million acres of forest. Only about 10% of the entire state is not woods. Even Oregon and Washington can't touch that number. Fact 49. It has more coastline than California. Maine's tidal shoreline runs about 3,478 miles, which actually beats California's 3,427 miles. The reason is the shape of it. Maine's coast is jagged, chewed up by thousands of inlets, bays, and islands, while California's is smooth and straight. Zoom in close enough, and the little state wins. Fact 48. Its plain coastline is only 228 miles. Here's the flip side of that. If you measure Maine's general coastline, just the rough outline you trace on a zoomed-out map, it's a mere 228 miles compared to California's 840. All that extra mileage comes from the crinkles. Maine's coast is basically a coastline paradox you can walk on. Fact 47. It's the only state that borders exactly one other state. Maine touches New Hampshire and nothing else. Every other state in the Union borders at least two. On three sides, it's water and Canada. Geographically, Maine is the loneliest state in America. Fact 46. Over half of it has no local government. More than 16,000 square miles of Maine sit in what's called the unorganized territories, which is over half the state's land area. There's no mayor, no town council, no local services. The state government handles everything from a distance because there's almost nobody there to govern. Fact 45. Some places don't even have names. In those territories, the map doesn't use town names. It uses grid coordinates. You'll see labels like Township 3, Range 4, instead of an actual place name. Hundreds of these numbered townships exist. Entire chunks of an American state were never important enough to name. Fact 44. One township has almost nobody in it. The Northwest Aroostook unorganized territory covers roughly 2,668 square miles, an area bigger than Delaware, and its recorded population has been as low as 27 people. That's about one person for every 100 square miles. You could walk for days out there and never see another human being. Fact 43. It's the emptiest state east of the Mississippi. Maine is the most sparsely populated state anywhere east of the Mississippi River. For a region as crowded as the Northeast, that's a stunning outlier. Boston has more people in a few neighborhoods than northern Maine has in thousands of square miles. Fact 42. There's a desert in the middle of the forest. Just outside Freeport sits the desert of Maine, about 40 acres of bare sandy silt surrounded by thick pine woods. It looks like somebody dropped a piece of Arizona into New England. In the greenest state in the country, there's a patch where almost nothing grows. Fact 41. That desert is a man-made disaster. The desert of Maine wasn't always there. In the late 1700s, the Tuttle family farmed that land for potatoes, but they never rotated their crops and let their sheep overgraze it. The thin topsoil blew away and exposed the glacial silt underneath. A family's farming mistakes created a desert that's now a tourist attraction. Fact 40. The soil was scraped clean by a glacier. The reason northern Maine can't support real farming comes down to ice. A glacier up to 2 miles thick ground across this land and stripped it down to rock, leaving behind thin, rocky, nutrient-poor soil. If this were Ohio, it would be wall-to-wall farms. Instead, it's trees, because trees are the only thing that will take. Fact 39. It holds the largest whirlpool in the Western Hemisphere. Off the coast of Eastport churns the Old Sow, a tidal whirlpool roughly 250 feet across, the biggest in the Western Hemisphere and one of only 5 major whirlpools on the planet. Small boats are warned to stay clear when the tide is running. It has taken lives over the years. Fact 38. That whirlpool has piglets. The smaller eddies that spin around the Old Sow are actually nicknamed the piglets. And the whirlpool's name likely comes from the pig-like sucking noises the water makes as it churns, though some say it traces to an old word meaning drain. If you get through it safely, you can even join the Old Sow Survivors Association. Fact 37. The whirlpool is caused by an underwater mountain. Beneath about 300 feet of water sits a 250-foot underwater hill. And when the massive tides of Passamaquoddy Bay and the Bay of Fundy slam together over it, the water has nowhere to go but around. A hidden mountain nobody can see creates a monster on the surface. Fact 36. It has the highest tides in the continental US. Up in the Eastport and Cobscook Bay area, the daily tidal range swings roughly 20 feet, the most extreme in the lower 48. Mudflats vanish completely twice a day. Boats that were floating in the morning sit on dry ground by afternoon. Fact 35. Those tides move more water than every river on Earth. On a single incoming tide over about 6 hours, roughly 160 billion tons of cold Atlantic water pours into the bay. That's more than 4 times the combined daily flow of every freshwater river on the entire planet, twice a day on the coast of Maine. Fact 34. It has the first sunrise in America. Because of its far eastern position, Maine is where the United States sees the sun first. The exact spot rotates through the year between Cadillac Mountain, Mars Hill, and West Quoddy Head, depending on the season. People set alarms for 3 a.m. and drive up in the dark just to be first. Fact 33. Cadillac Mountain is the highest point on the Atlantic coast. At 1,530 feet, Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park is the tallest peak on the eastern seaboard. It's built from pink granite that crystallized around 420 million years ago. And yes, the Cadillac Car Company is named after the same French explorer. Fact 32. The easternmost point of the lower 48 is here. West Quoddy Head in Lubeck is the furthest east you can stand in the contiguous United States. Nearby Eastport is the easternmost city in the country. If you want to be the first American to see the sun, this is where you go. Fact 31. Acadia was the first national park east of the Mississippi. Established in 1919, Acadia became the very first national park anywhere east of the Mississippi River. It now covers around 49,000 acres and draws over 3 million visitors a year, putting it among the 10 most visited parks in America. Fact 30. The Rockefellers paid for its roads. Acadia's famous carriage road system, more than 40 miles of crushed stone paths with hand-cut stone bridges, was financed largely by John D. Rockefeller Jr. He hated cars and wanted a way to travel the island by horse. Today, those car-free roads are one of the park's best features. Fact 29. Maine has over 2,500 lakes. Scattered across the state are more than 2,500 lakes and ponds, plus around 5,000 rivers and streams. Add all that flowing water together and Maine's river system stretches over 32,000 miles. Most of those glacial ponds have no inlet and no outlet at all. Fact 28. Its longest river forms the Canadian border. The St. John River runs about 418 miles and effectively separates Maine from Canada along much of the north. It's the longest river in the state. On one bank, you're in America. On the other, you're in New Brunswick. Fact 27. Maine grows 99% of America's wild blueberries. Almost the entire national supply of wild blueberries comes from Maine. The plants grow low to the ground in barrens, thriving in exactly the kind of poor, acidic, rocky soil that ruins everything else. The bad soil that killed farming turned out perfect for one crop. Fact 26. It supplies most of the nation's lobster. Maine harvests the overwhelming majority of America's lobster, roughly 90% of the national supply. The cold, rocky, island-strewn coast is ideal habitat. That jagged shoreline that gave Maine its record coastline is also what feeds the industry. Fact 25. Lobster used to be prisoner food. Here's the part people forget. Lobster was once considered so cheap and undesirable that it was fed to prisoners, servants, and livestock along the Maine coast. It was ground up for fertilizer. The delicacy people now pay a fortune for was treated as garbage. Fact 24. There's a 100-mile stretch of trail with no towns. Hikers on the Appalachian Trail in Maine face the 100-mile wilderness, one of the most brutal sections of the entire route. 100 miles of mountains, bogs, and forest with no resupply and no towns. You carry everything you need, or you don't make it. Fact 23. The Appalachian Trail ends on a mountain called Greatest. The northern terminus of the 2,190-mile Appalachian Trail sits atop Mount Katahdin, and its name translates from Penobscot as Greatest Mountain. At 5,269 feet, it's the highest point in Maine, with a gain of about 4,000 feet and notoriously vicious weather. Fact 22. Katahdin was a volcano that never erupted. Geologically, Katahdin is a laccolith, a bubble of magma that pushed up into the crust around 400 million years ago and froze solid underground instead of blowing out the top. The mountain that ends America's most famous trail is a monument to an eruption that never happened. Fact 21. It has a knife-edge ridge you can fall off both sides of. One route up Katahdin crosses the knife edge, a narrow rock spine with sheer drops on either side, in places barely wide enough to walk. Hikers have died on it. It's widely considered one of the most dangerous non-technical trails in the eastern United States. Fact 20. Katahdin was donated by one man. Baxter State Park, home to Katahdin, exists because Governor Percival Baxter bought the land with his own money over decades and gave it to the people of Maine, insisting it stay forever wild. He couldn't convince the legislature to protect it, so he paid for it himself. Fact 19. Two mountains are just numbers. In the unorganized territories, some peaks never got names either. Among ranges with proper names like Kibbe Mountain and King Mountain, there's simply number 5 mountain and number 7 mountain. The mapmakers ran out of interest before they ran out of mountains. Fact 18. The 45th parallel runs through it. Cutting across Maine is the 45th parallel, the exact halfway point between the equator and the North Pole. Cross it, and you're standing precisely between the middle of the Earth and the top of it. North of that line is where Maine's emptiness really begins. Fact 17. The last log drive in America happened here in 1976. For over a century, loggers threw millions of cut trees straight into Maine's rivers and let the current carry them to the mills. The Kennebec River saw the very last log drive in the United States in 1976. No American river has done one since. Fact 16. Men called river pigs rode the floating logs. During those drives, workers scrambled across the moving logs with poles, breaking up jams to keep the timber flowing. They were called river pigs, and the job was staggeringly dangerous. Slip between two logs in a fast river and you were gone. Fact 15. A highway follows the old road to Quebec. Highway 201 through western Maine is nicknamed the Old Canada Road because it traces the original route that connected Boston all the way to Quebec City. Before it was paved, the Kennebec River was the only practical way in or out of that whole region. Fact 14. Benedict Arnold's army was destroyed by this terrain. In 1775, Benedict Arnold tried to march an army through northern Maine to attack Quebec, figuring it was a quick shortcut. The terrain shredded him. His force traveled roughly 350 miles, twice the distance expected, and shrank from about 1,100 men to 600 starving survivors before they even saw a British soldier. Fact 13. America nearly went to war over Maine's trees. In the 1830s, American and Canadian lumberjacks began fighting over who owned the northern timber because the treaty ending the Revolution never clearly defined the border. It escalated into the Aroostook War, also called the Pork and Beans War, and the two nations came genuinely close to real fighting. Fact 12. A treaty drew the border to split the timber. Nobody wanted a full war over trees. So in 1842, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty carved out that strange jagged line you see on the map today, deliberately splitting the forests and waterways between the two countries. That treaty is the only reason this big empty thumb of land is American. Fact 11. Canada built right up to the border and America didn't. Look at a satellite map, and it's obvious. On the Quebec side of the line, roads and settlements spread out densely. On the Maine side, it's almost pure forest. Canada developed its half. America left its half in trees. Fact 10. French settlers beat the Pilgrims here by 16 years. In 1604, French colonists established a settlement on St. Croix Island in Maine, a full 16 years before the Pilgrims ever reached Plymouth Rock. That first winter was brutal and nearly killed them all. American colonial history started in Maine before it started in Massachusetts. Fact number 9. Maine used to be part of Massachusetts. For most of its early history, Maine wasn't its own state at all. It was a district of Massachusetts. It spent decades after the Revolution pushing for independence and finally got it in 1820. Fact 8. It only became a state because of slavery politics. Maine's statehood came through the Missouri Compromise of 1920. Admitted as a free state specifically to balance out Missouri entering as a slave state. Maine exists as a state because of a political deal that had nothing to do with Maine. Fact 7. It was the first state to ban alcohol. Way back in 1851, Maine became the first state in the nation to pass a law banning the sale of alcohol, decades before national prohibition. The law was so influential that similar statutes elsewhere were nicknamed Maine laws. Fact 6. There's an island both countries still claim. Makia Seal Island off Maine's easternmost point is claimed by both the United States and Canada, and the dispute has never been settled. It's one of the very few pieces of North American land whose sovereignty is still genuinely contested. Both countries just quietly agree to disagree. Fact 5. Getting anywhere takes forever. Maine's geography makes travel maddening. Interstate 95 runs north to south, but there's almost nothing running east to west. Acadia's Mount Desert Island sits only about 7.4 miles from the Scoodic Peninsula as the crow flies, but driving between them takes 44 miles and over an hour, because you have to go all the way around the water. Fact 4. The whole state has one national park and 400 plus townships. Maine's organized municipalities, all the real cities and towns combined, cover less than half the state. The rest is over 400 unincorporated townships and coastal islands administered from the capital. Half of Maine, on paper, is just a filing system. Fact 3. Its interior has almost no public roads. The reason so few people visit northern Maine isn't just distance. There genuinely aren't public roads into the deep interior. Most of that land is privately owned logging land, threaded with private timber roads. The emptiest part of the eastern United States is largely closed to the public. Fact 2. Maine has been logged for 2 centuries and is still almost all forest. Here's the fact that should stop you. Timber companies have been cutting Maine's woods for over 200 years, and yet there's only slightly less forest today than when they started. The forest simply grew back faster than people could clear it because nothing else would grow there. Fact 1. Northern Maine is empty for 2 reasons, and neither will change. Here's the truth that ties this whole state together. The glaciers scraped the soil down to almost nothing, so real farming was never possible, and the region sits hundreds of miles from Boston and Portland, with a hard international border cutting it off from the nearest big city, Quebec. No farms meant no towns. No nearby market meant no reason to build any. It was a 1-2 punch that knocked northern Maine out permanently, and there's very little reason to think it'll ever be anything more than what it is right now. Over 16,000 square miles of trees, water, and silence. And now you're one of the few people who actually knows why. So the next time somebody tells you Maine is just lobster and lighthouses, you'll know better. This is a state with more coastline than California, a desert in the middle of a forest, the biggest whirlpool in the hemisphere, tides that outmuscle every river on Earth, and half its land so empty it never even got named. All of it hiding in plain sight. Which one caught you off guard the most? Drop it in the comments and stick around, because every state in this country is hiding something.